Commander Jake Morrison felt the cold marble floor beneath his boots as he stood in the massive hall of the Galactic Council. The ceiling stretched so high above him that he could barely see where it ended. Everything around him was made of some kind of crystal that caught light and threw rainbow patterns across the walls. His old military jacket, with its patches and worn edges, looked really out of place in this perfect, shining room. Dr. Lisa Carter stood next to him, her fingers moving quickly across her tablet screen. She was trying to record everything she saw, but her eyes kept getting drawn to the aliens sitting round a huge circular table in front of them. These weren't the green little creatures from old movies back on Earth. These beings looked like they were made of light itself. Some had skin you could see through, others seemed to float a few inches above their chairs. They all looked scared. The one doing the talking was taller than the rest, maybe 8 feet, if it stood up straight. Its voice sounded like wind chimes when it spoke, soft and musical, but Jake could hear the fear underneath. When it showed them the holographic pictures, Jake's stomach dropped. Entire planets were just ... gone. Not destroyed like in a war, but completely eaten away. The pictures showed solar systems that used to have 8 or 9 worlds, now down to just empty space and a few rocks. Whatever these devourers were, they didn't just kill things, they made them disappear completely. 12 systems, the alien repeated, and its voice cracked a little. Billions of lives, our colonies, our art, our history, all of it consumed, and they're getting faster. Jake leaned forward to get a better look at the tactical screens. The data was all in alien writing, but the patterns were clear enough. Red dots showing where attacks happened, dates showing how quickly they were spreading. It reminded him of tracking a forest fire back home, except this fire ate entire worlds. So when your ships saw these things coming, you just turned around and left? Jake asked. He tried to keep his voice neutral, but Lisa shot him a warning. Look anyway. The alien speaker's shoulders sagged. We tried to communicate first. That's what we always do. When that failed, our captains followed standard protocol. Preserve life, avoid conflict, retreat to safe distance. But you never fired a single shot? Commander Morrison, another alien, spoke up. This one smaller with blue-tinted skin. You must understand. Our species eliminated warfare over 3,000 years ago. We redirected all military research into exploration and diplomacy. The concept of ship-to-ship combat is as foreign to us as eating our own young would be to you. Lisa looked up from her tablet. That's incredible. You've had peace for 3,000 years. Longer for some of us, the speaker said. The Valkyrie haven't seen violence in 5,000 years. The Deshians evolved past aggressive tendencies completely. They don't even have the brain chemistry for anger anymore. Jake rubbed his forehead. Back on Earth, 3,000 years ago, humans were still fighting with swords and shields. Even now, in 2387, Earth had conflict somewhere almost every day. These aliens had achieved something humanity could barely imagine, and now it might be the thing that destroyed them. So why call us? Lisa asked. Earth's been on your dangerous worlds list since first contact. We know, because your ships won't even enter our solar system without an escort. The speaker's translucent skin seemed to glow brighter for a moment. Because you're survivors, your world tried to kill you for millions of years. And you not only lived but thrived. You turned a death world into a home. You know things we've forgotten how to know. Jake felt something shift in his chest. For years, humans had been treated like the galaxy's dangerous neighbors. Too violent, too unpredictable, too primitive. Trade happened through intermediaries. Diplomatic meetings were held in neutral space. Human tourists needed special permits to visit most council worlds. Now these same beings, who had kept humanity at arm's length, were asking for help. We need teachers, the speaker continued. We need protectors. We need beings who understand. that sometimes the only way to preserve life is to be willing to take it. The room fell silent except for the soft humming of the alien technology around them. Jake looked at his team, Lisa, Tom Bradley, Rebecca Hayes. They were all thinking the same thing. Humanity had spent decades trying to prove they belonged in galactic society. Now they had their chance, but it meant becoming exactly what the galaxy had always feared. They were dot warriors. Captain Tom Bradley felt like he was walking through a museum instead of a military facility. The Council's so-called weapons archive stretched out in front of him like a warehouse, but everything he saw made his jaw drop for all the wrong reasons. These weren't weapons, they were fancy tools that happened to shoot energy beams. General, Rebecca Hayes picked up what the aliens called a combat rifle and nearly laughed out loud. The thing was made of some kind of lightweight metal that felt like it would break if you dropped it. Worse yet, it had about 50 different safety switches and required a full minute to charge up before firing. Back on Earth, a soldier could be dead 20 times over waiting for this thing to work. "Look at this armor," Tom said, holding up what looked like a shimmering silver jumpsuit. It was beautiful, sure, but when he ran his finger along the edge, it felt like silk. "This wouldn't stop a throne rock, let alone whatever those devourers are using." Rebecca was reading through a tactical manual, and her face got more confused with every page. "Tom, listen to this battle strategy. Phase 1, attempt diplomatic contact. Phase 2, broadcast cultural exchange materials. Phase 3, retreat to minimum safe distance and wait for peaceful resolution. There's no Phase 4. What happens if the enemy doesn't want to talk? Apparently, that's never happened before." The more they dug through the archives, the more incredible it became. The aliens had spent thousands of years turning their military equipment into exploration gear. Their ships were designed to run away from danger, not fight it. Their soldiers were trained in first aid and linguistics, not combat tactics. Dr. Mark Stevens came jogging over from the other side of the facility, carrying a stack of files that looked ready to fall over. His face was red from running, and he was shaking his head like he couldn't believe what he'd just learned. "You're not going to believe the interviews I just finished," Mark said, catching his breath. "I spent 3 hours trying to explain basic military concepts to their war council, and it was like talking to children about calculus." "How bad is it?" Rebecca asked. "Well, when I said we needed to discuss taking casualties, they thought I meant kidnapping people. When I mentioned flanking maneuvers, they asked if that was some kind of dance. And don't even get me started on what happened when I brought up guerrilla warfare." Tom raised an eyebrow. "What did they think that was?" "They spent 20 minutes asking me about Earth's intelligent apes and whether we'd trained them to use tools in combat." Rebecca had to sit down. The situation was even worse than they'd imagined. It wasn't just that these aliens were peaceful. They literally couldn't understand conflict. Their languages didn't even have proper words for military strategy because they'd never needed them. "Show me their planet files," she said. "I need to understand how they got this way." Mark pulled out his tablet and started scrolling through data. The Valkyrie homeworld is basically a giant garden. Perfect temperature year-round. No storms, no earthquakes, no predators bigger than what we'd call a butterfly. Their biggest natural disaster is when it rains too much and some flowers grow too tall. And the Deshans, even better. Their world has 3 suns, so there's never any darkness. Food grows everywhere without any effort. The most dangerous animal on their planet is something like a really lazy cow that moves too slowly to hurt anyone even by accident. Tom was looking at Earth's file on the same tablet, and the contrast was stunning. Where the alien worlds were, described in gentle, poetic language, Earth's entry looked like a warning label on a bottle of poison. "Listen to what they wrote about us," Tom said. "Species exhibits troubling adaptation to hostile environment. Demonstrates concerning ability to thrive under extreme stress. Warning: inhabitants show aggressive problem-solving tendencies and pack-hunting behavior. Recommend maintaining quarantine protocols. Pack hunting behavior? Rebecca asked. I think that's their way of saying, we work well in teams during combat situations. Mark laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. They're terrified of us because we learned to cooperate under pressure. Meanwhile, they're about to be wiped out because they never learned to fight back when something wants to eat them. Rebecca stood up and started pacing. She'd been a general for 15 years, fought in conflicts across 3 different star systems, and trained thousands of soldiers. But she'd never faced a challenge like this. How do you teach warfare to people who don't even understand what enemies are? Get me a direct line to Admiral Thompson, she told Tom. We need every human ship, every human soldier, every human officer who knows how to fight, and we need them yesterday. What are you thinking? I'm thinking we're about to give the galaxy's most peaceful species a crash course in survival. We're going to have to teach them everything. How to think like predators, how to plan for the worst-case scenario, how to make the hard choices that keep people alive. Tom nodded grimly. And we're going to have to do it fast, because those devourers aren't going to wait for them to graduate. As alarms started ringing in the distance, they all knew their time for preparation was running out. The galaxy's most dangerous species was about to become its last hope for survival. Lieutenant Colonel Danny Walsh wiped sweat from his forehead as he watched his engineering team install the last of the kinetic barrier generators on a Thessian evacuation ship. The vessel looked like something out of a fairy tale, all curved lines and crystalline windows that sparkled in the starlight. It was beautiful, but it had about as much armor as a soap bubble. The Thessians themselves were even more delicate than their ships. They stood about 7 feet tall, but were so thin. They looked like they might break in a strong wind. Their skin had a translucent quality that reminded Danny of flower petals, and when they moved, it was with a grace that seemed to flow like water. These beings had never known violence, and it showed in every gentle gesture they made. Careful. With that mounting bracket, Danny called out to his team. We punch a hole in the wrong place, and we'll decompress half their ship. Across the hangar, Staff Sergeant Amy Rodriguez was having her own challenges. She'd been tasked with teaching basic survival skills to a group of Thessian civilians, but it was like trying to explain swimming to someone who had never seen water. Okay, everyone, let's practice the emergency drill one more time, Amy said, trying to keep her voice calm and encouraging. The Thessians looked at her with their large, trusting eyes, ready to learn but completely lost about why they needed to learn it. She pointed to the mock-up shelter they'd built in the corner of the room. When you hear the alarm that loud, sound we played earlier, you need to move fast to the safe zone. Don't walk. Don't stop to get your belongings. Just go straight there. One of the younger Thessians raised a hand that looked more like a graceful branch than fingers. But what if we're in the middle of eating? Mother always says it's rude to leave food unfinished. Amy took a deep breath. Back on Earth, even children understood that when the tornado siren went off, you ran for the basement. Here, she was dealing with beings whose biggest worry had always been table manners. If the alarm sounds, forget about being polite. Forget about being neat. Just run and hide, okay? Meanwhile, Colonel Steve Parker was dealing with his own impossible task. He stood in the engine room of a Council warship, staring at technology that was centuries ahead of anything humans had built, but designed by people who thought the worst thing that could happen was a solar flare. This thing has more computing power than our entire home fleet, he told his chief engineer. But look at this, they built the reactor control room with floor-to-ceiling windows, because they thought it would be nice to have a view. His team was working around the clock to install actual armor plating, weapons systems, and emergency bulkheads. It was like trying to turn a luxury hotel into a fortress. Except the hotel was flying through space, and they had to do it without shutting off the power. Sir, we've got a problem, called out one of his technicians. Their life support system is so integrated with the ship's aesthetics that we can't install blast doors without cutting off air to half the crew quarters. Steve rubbed his temples. Can we reroute the air through maintenance tunnels? What maintenance? Tunnels. They don't have any. When something breaks, they just replace the whole section. Before Steve could answer, alarms started blaring throughout the ship. But these weren't drill alarms. They were the real thing. His radio crackled to life with urgent reports from the outer sensor stations. All human units, this is command. Devourer scout ships have just dropped out of hyperspace near the Valkyrie system. Major Wilson, get your fighters in the air now. Major. Kate Wilson was already running toward her fighter before the announcement finished. She'd been expecting this moment for days, but her heart still pounded as she slid into the cockpit of her interceptor. Around her, 11 other human pilots were doing the same, their fighters looking tiny and fragile compared to the massive alien ships in the hangar. This is Wilson to all Raptor squadrons, she said into her comm as her engines fired up. Remember, we're not trying to win a war here. We just need to prove that these things can be fought. The launch was smooth, and within minutes, Kate's squadron was racing through space toward the Valkyrie homeworld. What they saw when they arrived made her stomach drop. 3 Devourer scout ships hung in space like dark metal mountains, each one easily 10 times the size of the largest human destroyer. But size wasn't everything, and Kate had learned that lesson fighting pirates in the outer colonies. All units, remember your training. These things are big, which means they're probably slow. Use your speed, use your maneuverability, and don't try to be heroes. The Devourers opened fire first, sending streams of energy that would have vaporized any ship they hit. But Kate and her pilots danced between the beams like leaves in a hurricane. Their small fighters, twisting and diving in patterns no large ship could follow. I've got a lock on the first one's engine section, called out Lieutenant Pete Jackson, going in for an attack run. Negative, Jackson. Hit their sensor arrays first. Blind them, then we'll go for the engines. For 20 minutes, the human fighters played a deadly game of tag with the Devourer scouts. Every time the enemy ships tried to track them, the humans would flip and dive in directions that defied what the Devourers expected. It was like watching hummingbirds attack eagles. Finally, with all 3 scout ships damaged and venting atmosphere, the Devourers turned and jumped back into hyperspace. Kate's squadron regrouped, breathing hard but victorious. Back at the council headquarters, the alien delegates watched the battle footage in complete silence. Finally, the council speaker turned to the humans with something that might have been awe in its voice. You fought them, it whispered. You actually fought the Devourers and won. Danny looked up from his work on the evacuation ships. For the first time since they'd arrived, he saw something in the aliens' faces that hadn't been there before. It wasn't just gratitude, it was hope. Admiral David Thompson had seen a lot of scary things in his 30 years of military service, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. Through the main viewing screen of his flagship, the sky looked wrong. Where there should have been stars, there was only darkness, a darkness made up of thousands upon thousands of Devourer ships stretching as far as the sensors could reach. The enemy fleet was so massive that it actually blocked out the light from distant suns. Thompson's own fleet looked like a handful of toys floating in front of a tidal wave. 57 human warships against what his tactical officer estimated to be over 15,000 Devourer vessels. The math was simple and terrifying. Captain Jennifer Clark stood beside him at the command station, her fingers flying across multiple control panels as she tried to coordinate with the alien ships that had joined them. The council vessels looked different now. They had the armor plating and weapons that human engineers had installed, but more importantly, they had crews that were finally ready to fight. Admiral, the Valkyrie squadron is requesting permission to take point position, Jennifer reported. They want to be in the front line. Thompson raised an eyebrow. 3 weeks ago, these same aliens had been ready to surrender without firing a shot. Now they were volunteering for the most dangerous positions in the battle formation. Grant their request, he said. "And Jennifer, tell them we're proud to fight alongside them." The communication system crackled to life as Thompson opened a channel to every ship in their small fleet. Human voices mixed with the musical tones of Theshan translators and the harmonic frequencies that the Velkari used for speech. "This is Admiral Thompson to all units," he began, his voice carrying 2,000s of beings across dozens of different species. "I'm not going to lie to you. The odds are not in our favor. But sometimes, the odds don't matter. Sometimes, all that matters is standing up when someone needs you to stand up." He paused, looking out at the approaching enemy fleet. "Behind us are billions of innocent people who have never hurt anyone. They're counting on us to buy them time to escape. So, that's what we're going to do. We hold the line here. No retreat, no surrender. We make our stand, and we make it count." The battle began with a flash of light that could probably be seen from neighboring star systems. The Devourer fleet opened fire all at once, sending streams of destructive energy racing toward the defenders. Thompson's ships scattered like startled birds, but instead of running away, they dove straight into the enemy formation. Commander Ryan Foster's destroyer was one of the first to make contact. His ship, the Hurricane, was built for speed and hit-and-run attacks, but Foster drove it straight into the middle of 3 Devourer cruisers. His weapons blazed as he drew their fire away from a transport ship filled with Thessian families, trying to escape. "Foster, get out of there," Thompson shouted over the radio. "You're outnumbered, 3-1. "Negative, Admiral." Foster's voice came back, calm and steady. "These families need 30 more seconds to clear the danger zone. I can give them 30 seconds. Thompson watched helplessly as the Hurricane took hit after hit. Foster's ship was tough, but not tough enough to survive the concentrated fire from 3 enemy cruisers. Just as the transport cleared to safety, the Hurricane's engines exploded, but instead of trying to escape, Foster did something that made Thompson's heart skip a beat. The damaged destroyer suddenly accelerated straight toward the largest Devourer cruiser, its remaining weapons firing continuously. "For humanity," Foster shouted over the radio just before his ship crashed into the enemy vessel. Both ships disappeared in a ball of fire that lit up the battlefield. The transport ship full of Thessian refugees made it to safety, down on the surface of the Council's capital world. Sergeant Major Michelle Adams was fighting a different kind of battle. Devourer landing craft had broken through the orbital defenses, and their troops were now trying to capture the evacuation centers where millions of aliens were waiting for transport. Off-world. Michelle's squad was a mix of human marines and alien volunteers who had learned basic combat skills in the past few weeks. The aliens were clumsy with their weapons and still flinched at loud noises, but they had something that surprised even Michelle. They were brave. "Incoming from the east," shouted Private Ben Torres, pointing toward a group of Devourer soldiers, advancing through the ruins of what used to be a beautiful garden district. A young Thessian volunteer named something Michelle couldn't pronounce, but called. Bloom raised his rifle with shaking hands. A month ago, this being had been a poet who spent his days writing about flowers. Now he was taking aim at creatures that wanted to destroy everything he loved. "Steady, Bloom," Michelle said. "Remember your training. Breathe, aim, squeeze." The shot took down the lead Devourer soldier. Bloom stared at his rifle like he couldn't believe what had just happened. But then he was already reloading for the next shot, back in space. The battle was turning into something Thompson had never seen before. His human ships were falling one by one. They'd known this would happen, but something incredible was occurring at the same time. The alien vessels, instead of running when things got dangerous, were moving forward to fill the gaps left by destroyed human ships. A Valkyrie captain named something that translated to Swift Current moved his ship directly between a damaged human cruiser and 3 Devourer attackers. His vessel took heavy damage, but he held position until the human ship could retreat and repair. Dr. Lisa Carter watched the battle from the command center, her tablet forgotten as she stared at the tactical displays. "David, look at this," she said to Thompson over a private channel. "The alien casualty reports are coming in, but they're not retreating. They're actually fighting harder." Thompson could see it too. What had started as a desperate last stand by a small human fleet had turned into something else entirely. The aliens weren't fighting because they had to anymore. They were fighting because they wanted to protect the humans who had taught them how to be brave. A Decian communications officer turned to Thompson with tears streaming down her flower-like face. "Admiral, Captain Swift Current sends his regards. His ship is badly damaged, but he says to tell you that he's honored to die beside warriors." Thompson felt his throat tighten. These beings had been strangers just months ago. They'd kept humanity at a distance, afraid of their violent nature. Now, they were calling humans their brothers and sisters, willing to sacrifice everything to stand together against the darkness. The battle was far from over, but something had already been won. The galaxy would never be the same. Colonel Brian Murphy's boots echoed softly in the medical bay as he walked between rows of recovery beds that told the story of the galaxy's transformation. 3 days had passed since the last Devourer ship had limped away into deep space, but the real victory was happening right here in this room, on his left. A human marine named Rodriguez was having his broken arm set by a Decian healer whose delicate, flower-like hands glowed with some kind of natural healing energy. On his right, a Valkyrie pilot was teaching a human medic how to use their advanced pain relief technology on a wounded human soldier. The barriers that had kept species apart for decades were crumbling faster than anyone had thought possible. Dr. Cynthia Thompson, no relation to the Admiral, despite sharing a name, looked up from a surgical table where she was working on a Decian volunteer who had taken shrapnel during the ground fighting. Her hands moved quickly, but she paused to wipe sweat from her forehead with the back of her wrist. "Colonel, you need to see this," she called out, her voice filled with something between amazement and exhaustion. 6 hours ago, this patient would have died from these injuries. Human medicine couldn't repair damage to Veshan nerve tissue, and their healers couldn't handle the massive trauma to his vital organs. She gestured to the team working around her, 3 humans and 2 Veshan healers, working together like they'd been doing it for years instead of days. But together, we're performing miracles. Their biotechnology can regrow damaged tissue, while our surgical techniques repair the structural damage. We're saving lives that neither of our species could have saved alone. Across the room, Murphy watched a young human corpsman named Williams carefully applying some kind of Valkyrie healing gel to the burns on an alien soldier's back. The Valkyrie patient was trying to teach Williams a few words in his musical language, and both of them were laughing despite their injuries. "It's not just the medical techniques," Murphy observed. "They're actually becoming friends." Dr. Thompson nodded as she continued her work. "Yesterday, these same aliens were terrified of us. They thought we were violent savages who might hurt them. Today, they're asking to learn how to fight alongside us and our people." She gestured toward Williams. 3 months ago, most humans had never even seen an alien up close. Now they're treating them like family. The transformation wasn't limited to the medical bay. Throughout the station, Murphy could see evidence of how quickly everything had changed. Human engineers were working side by side with alien technicians to repair damaged ships. But they weren't just fixing them, they were improving them. The aliens brought advanced technology that humans had never dreamed of, while humans brought practical engineering solutions that made everything work better. In the council chambers, the change was even more dramatic. Jake Morrison stood at attention as he had weeks ago, but the room felt completely different now. The aliens who had once seemed fragile and ethereal now carried themselves with a confidence that hadn't been there before. They still moved with their characteristic grace, but there was strength underneath it now. The council speaker looked different too. Its translucent skin seemed brighter, more solid somehow. When it spoke, its voice carried an authority that came from having faced the worst possible situation and survived. "Commander Morrison, General Hayes," the speaker began, "we owe you a debt that can never be repaid. But more than that, you have given us something we didn't even know we had lost." General Rebecca Hayes stepped forward. She looked tired. They all did, but there was satisfaction in her eyes. "What's that?" "Purpose," said a Valkyrie representative, its harmonic voice ringing with conviction. "For thousands of years, we thought we had achieved perfection by eliminating conflict from our lives. We thought peace meant the absence of struggle. You showed us that real peace is something you fight to protect." Another alien, one of the Isians, who had volunteered for ground combat, spoke up. "We are establishing military academies on our homeworlds, not to wage war, but to be ready to defend what matters. We want human instructors to teach us." Jake felt a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "And what about patrol duties? Who's going to watch the borders?" "We are," the Desin said, firmly. "All of us. The Valkyrie are converting merchant vessels into scout ships. The Veshans are training pilots for reconnaissance missions. We will never again be caught defenseless." The council speaker stepped forward, and Murphy was struck by how much taller it seemed to stand now. "You came here as warriors, but you leave as something more. You are our teachers, our guardians, our friends. You showed us that strength doesn't come from avoiding hardship, it comes from facing it together." Rebecca nodded slowly. "And you taught us something just as important. All these years, we thought our role in the galaxy was to be the tough guys, the fighters that everyone else was afraid of. We thought survival was just about being strong enough to take whatever the universe threw at us." She looked around the room at the faces of beings who had been strangers just weeks ago. "But you showed us that survival isn't just about enduring. It's about having something worth protecting. It's about building something better than what came before." The formal meeting dissolved into something more like a celebration. Humans and aliens mingled freely, sharing stories from the battle, making plans for the future, and building friendships that would last generations. The careful diplomatic protocols that had governed human-alien relations for decades were replaced by the simple bonds that form between people who have fought side by side. Dr. Thompson appeared at Murphy's elbow, having finished her surgery. "You know what the best part is?" she said, watching a group of human and alien children playing together in a corner of the room. Refugee families who had been evacuated during the battle. "What's that? Those kids don't see any difference between themselves and the alien children. To them, we're all just people who helped each other when things got scary. They're going to grow up in a galaxy where cooperation is normal, where different species working together is just how things are done." Murphy watched the children play and realized she was right. The war with the Devourers had ended, but what it had started was something much more important. Humanity had found its place in the galaxy not as conquerors or outsiders, but as part of a family that was stronger together than any of them could be alone. The Deathworlders had become the galaxy's shield, but in protecting others, they had discovered something they hadn't even known they were looking for. They had found their true home among the stars.